another audience member with some comments.
Aaron Chevron, University of Washington, and I am in the same boat with the GIS side for facility management as an owner. The whole BIM life cycle is great for design and construction, but it really starts to fall apart on the operation side, primarily because of the overhead necessary to maintain those models. Right now we have a process of using CAD as a source because we have CAD for everything. So they will be BIM. But actually using that as the foundation, our single source of truth for defining our GIS floor plans, which are our coat hanger to hang all the other data off of. And it's a way of being able to relate information versus a BIM world, which is very much a joining of information. And so it causes some limitations in that. And one of the biggest challenges I've had with BIM is scalability. 250 buildings or more and 20 million square feet in BIM, not going to work out so well. So GIS really has that power of scalability to, from the molecular level all the way up to the world or other planets even, that BIM just doesn't quite have.
If I could just respond to that, sorry.
No, you respond to it. You respond, I'll respond.
Oh, okay. All right. So if I could just respond to that.
I want BIM to work. I really do. I want it to work, but
One of the statistics that Pete put on his slide was when did the first GIS come out, or the idea of the first GIS come out? 1854. And was he using a computer?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
It was an Atari.
Yeah. And GIS kind of started off with the whole sense of geography, and GIS has evolved into being anything spatial. And so, back to your comment, it has become spatial, so that even inside the building now people are saying that's GIS. I would argue that BIM is, from an infrastructure perspective, on a similar timeline, in that today there are issues in terms of being able to support these sophisticated, intelligent models in a larger perspective. You said making it scalable. And when I look at where BIM was even just a few years ago compared to today, and if I take a look at the overall BIM process instead of focusing on specific pieces of technology, if I look at the process to me makes perfect sense. It's something that I want to strive for. And yes, we still have challenges, but I would say to you those challenges are because BIM still has a way to go. Make sense? Anybody else would agree with that? Okay, thank you.
There's a lot in the acronyms, isn't there? BIM suggests it's only to do with buildings or building design.
Thank you. Yes.
How about WIM, World Information Modeling, or something that's quite ubiquitous information modeling?
I think the important part of whatever we call it, the important part of GIS is not the G, is not the S, it's the I. And even though GIS has evolved to be spatial, nobody's changing the acronym. BIM has also evolved. The important aspect of BIM is the I, for information. Okay? And so I like to think of BIM as information models first, but for the built environment. And I don't get hung up on the acronym.
I think that's the challenge, that the world is hung up on the acronym, because you do think of BIM as building. And I like to think that GIS is actually the I in BIM, as being a source of information to actually feed that process. But the gentleman at the back, you're exactly right, just that scaling at the moment it's terribly off kilter. Yeah, I heard somebody saying architects move the building or move the earth to match the building. Have you ever heard that expression?
Yeah.
And that's not being disrespectful to architects, but that's a challenge. And I'm doing what with architects at the moment, if I may give you some anecdotal information. I'm talking to architects constantly, but it's just talking to architects about that information, and Mike, I can see your point, exactly right, information. this wealth of information that's available to you, and it does have geographical context that could be used to actually help you with that complete design process. Make it more of a complete design process as opposed to, this thing called GIS, we don't know what it means, don't understand it, don't care, you need to be an expensive vendor, blah, blah, blah. But, hey, when was the last time, Mr. Architect, you dealt with your client in that lead process? 25% of the points around sustainable site selection. How do you do that? Anyway, exactly right. Did you want to counter?
Well, I just wanted to follow up about the information management in BIM. Just the very structure of BIM seems to have a limitation as to the scope of the information. It's limited to a building. What we really need is something to manage a larger set of information across many buildings, and all the information sort of lives at the same level versus being pushed into an individual file per building and cut down into little pieces, because you can't do information management in little chunks. You need to do it at the large scale.
And I understand. And from an infrastructure perspective, I understand from an architecture perspective that is something that several folks have talked about. From an infrastructure perspective, I know Autodesk with Map 3D and the industry models are getting beyond that to make something that is scalable across infrastructure that spans very, very wide regions of space. So I hear what you're saying, and we still have some work to do.
Great. Another comment? Well, my sort of comment is twofold. One, I have a very simplistic view of a large architecture firm that does planning, so we sort of have GIS sort of needs, but the way they're using architecture tools, we have that facility. So I have a very simplistic view. In some ways, I think GIS is the outside, and there's an inside. It's a model. And it's a very simple way of looking at it, but I think of the space, there's an inside. And that's probably the benefit of having the BIM. I think it'll challenge the information as they more toward the model is actually sort of why you actually do the one and two, because the information can be stored, you might say, in a GIS system, but the model is actually describing that relationship that you're not maybe getting with the GIS tool, right? So, we think that when you develop a model to go to FM, the reason you have the model is that you can understand the relationship between a series of lights or a building system inside of a building that you wouldn't necessarily understand from just the information. So that's the challenge that the information is the key to the model part. And to your comment, I think it's definitely a scalable, there's scalability issues, but I think fundamentally the difference maybe right now is the representation technology has to be different from the modeling technology for BIM, where the GIS you probably can, in some ways, use the same infrastructure for both. So I think that's the difference.
And there's a question over there too, if I may, and you're exactly right. So bring on that point, and one of your points there back. The other challenge is there's multiple sources of truth. What is the source of truth? I have that tongue-in-cheek statistic on the screen earlier with the 10 and 7. There's vendors, different file formats, different sources of truth, different parts of an organisation that say their source of truth is the right one. And this, I'm helping you, Mike, but that does become a challenge when you are trying to get into that information modelling. Well, okay, what is the correct information? I'm sure about the University of Kentucky, whether you had that same challenge with multiple sources of truth, or if you just made a decision and that's it.
No, the problem was there were multiple sources of truth. When we ran a statistic on our report, 2 sources were all 5 million square feet. So we have to find a single source of truth.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned single source of truth. Do you have that same challenge, or?
We have gone to CAD as our single source of truth, and GIS is a translated version of that aggregates them all together. And so from a validation perspective, we use GIS as a single source of truth because it's all aggregated together for example, room numbers. Because if you had to validate against each and every CAD file, you never do it. But moving that into a database, you now have all of those CAD files into a single common data structure that you can validate against.
If I may, can I give an anecdotal story, a really brief one? But I think it just highlights the challenges that you're going through as well. I'm not going to mention the name of the customer. I didn't even ask permission, but I carried on.
You just kept going.
I know, I'm like the Energizer Bunny. I'm not going to mention the name of the municipality or the customer because it wouldn't be fair. But I'm sat in front of an engineer, city engineer, the planning department were there, the engineers were using AutoCAD-based solutions, Civil 3D, AutoCAD. So help me understand your workflow very quickly. Well, with the surveying department, we got surveyors going out, they're going to put an asset down, new fire hydrant, survey, come back, put the engineering drawings together, go out for tendering, we build, we get the as-built, bring them back, documentation is there. What do you do next? Well, the GIS department needs it. And this is the source of the truth conversation. And where it can be a challenge with this whole process too. So how do you get that information from the engineers to the GIS? Well, the GIS people print the documentation out, we digitize, and God's honest truth, you could hear crickets in the room. So I turn to the lady that runs the GIS department and said, please help me understand your workflow. She said, well, we take their information, we re-digitize, and quote, and I kid you not, quote, we move their stuff to make our maps look pretty. So I'm on the pro side of GIS, don't get me wrong, and I'm sure we're going to have a conversation about accuracy and so forth momentarily, but again, it's the challenge of these multiple sources of truth, identifying what's right, and this does all play into this relationship with BIM and GIS. By the way, finishing that workflow, somebody backs into a fire hydrant because there's 4 feet of snow, knocks the top of the hydrant off. What happens? City engineers need to go out, turn off the hydrant, resurvey, redraw everything. And this is after they print out the GIS, have a jolly good laugh about it, throw the document away. But again, this is all... I'm moving on the side of the argument here, and I'm... But
Keep going, Pete.
It's all symbiotic. One relies upon the other, but I honestly believe because of 1854 that GIS, if I use that term, is better poised to actually be that parent of BIM and help BIM move along. Not that sound right. It sounded good for me.